America would suffer a much greater depression in the 1930s. Dubai will run out of food in about a week's time. Millionaires just fleeing with their wealth. Now they're going to Singapore, now they're going to Southeast Asia. Once the illusion is shattered, you can't ever resurrect it again.
But it seems that Iran is obviously prioritizing going after the Gulf states because that's a good way of creating some pain for the US-led alliance. How vulnerable do you see them being here, though?
Yeah, so the Gulf states are the great vulnerability of the American empire because Israel, it has an eschatology. Unfortunately, religious zealots have taken over the state of Israel. So they're perfectly okay to die for what they believe in. And they can live in bomb shelters for years and years. That's how strong their faith is. And Israel was designed as an extremely resilient, extremely creative society. So Israel will emerge from this war intact and probably even stronger. But the Gulf states are different. The Gulf states are basically mirages. These 50 years ago, these were just deserts, right? And for most of human history, the Arabian Peninsula was not that inhabited because it didn't have access to fresh water. It didn't have much agricultural output, and so it cannot sustain a large population. And most were desert nomads engaged in trade. But Pax Americana changed all that because Pax Americana could needed oil to fund its empire, and it could offer protection to the Gulf states. So they developed really rapidly. So cities with maybe tens of thousands of people before now are in the millions. And one striking example is Dubai. You go to Dubai, it's just skyscraper after skyscraper. It is a very glitzy city, and it's trying to be the financial capital of the Middle East. And there are thousands of extremely wealthy individuals who've transferred their savings to Dubai because they believe that it's safe, it's comfortable, lots of good Michelin restaurants, lots of good five-star hotels, and I'm not taxed. But this image of Dubai as a financial hub is now shattered by this war, and they'll never recover from this. In fact, we're already hearing rumors of millionaires just fleeing with their wealth. Now they're going to Singapore. Now they're going to Southeast Asia. A bigger problem is this. A bigger problem is that because the Strait of Hormuz is closed, their oil economies have collapsed. They can no longer sell their oil, and they shut down their oil production facilities. What people don't recognize is that the Strait of Hormuz takes GCC oil to Asia, but then it brings back food. The GCC imports 80 to 90% of its food supply. So the rumor is Dubai will run out of food in about a week's time. Then there's the issue of fresh water, where the greatest vulnerability is actually desalination plants. So the GCC nations, desalination plants provide about 6% of all their water needs. And so if these desalination plants are destroyed, then they run out of water in 1 or 2 weeks. And this means the entire destruction of the GCC. I mean, destroying desalination plants will be the nuclear option for Iran, and so I don't think they would use it very lightly. But there's really no coming back from what's happening. I mean, for the longest time, the GCC had a reputation for being safe, for being extremely wealthy. And now that mirage, that illusion has been shattered. And once the illusion is shattered, you can't ever resurrect it again.
No, well, no, I very much agree. The Gulf states are not just dependent on energy, but the finance, the real estate market, which is propped up by all the expats. But what you're also describing, though, is these small monarchies selling their oils in dollar, and the U.S. in return offering protection. This was also the petrodollar system that replaced Bretton Woods once they closed the gold window. So what do you see being the possible consequences for the global economy?
Right. So what Iran wants to do is basically kick the US out of the Middle East for a lot of reasons. And the main advantage is that once the US leaves, Iran will be able to control the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, it will control trade access for the entire world. And that and so the Gulf states will basically become client states of the Iranians rather than Americans. And that oil money now will be able to finance the rebuilding of Iran. So that's the end goal or the end game for the Iranians. The problem with empire is the hubris. And so another way of saying this is the empire would rather destroy the world than surrender its power, right? So the idea that the Americans will just leave the Middle East peacefully is just wishful thinking. Everyone's saying that, this war can only lead to the defeat of America. So America should just admit defeat right now and then go home and let Israel and Iran settle whatever problems that they have. Like the Middle East is not America's problem. But again, the problem is that America is addicted to the petrodollar. Leaving the Middle East would destroy the petrodollar. And if the petrodollar is destroyed, it would collapse the American economy as well. So America has $40 trillion in debt. And this debt is a Ponzi scheme. Like the American economy is sustained by a Ponzi scheme. And so the Gulf states, what they do is they sell their oil, get petrodollars, and then they recycle it back into the American economy, mainly by investing into AI, into data centers, which is now the main engine of growth for the American economy. So the Gulf states were to stop investing in America, the AI financial bubble would burst, and with it, the entire American economy. America would suffer a much greater depression than the 1930s. That's how dire the situation is for America right now.
But the United States, though, they must have known that this would be a disaster. I mean, many of the top military people in the United States warned in advance that they would have limited weapons. They would have a limited ability to go on for too long, which of course could explain why they instead going for burning down Iran if they can't, if time is essentially on Iran's side. But there's been war games in the past where they showed that they couldn't pull this off. I mean, you had God knows how many American presidents who wanted to attack Iran, but they always knew that yeah, that's not a good idea. So how do you make sense of this? Because that was my one when they were building up to this war, sending more and more military hardware to the region. My main reason for thinking this might not happen was it would simply be too crazy. The likelihood of success, the amount of things that could go wrong. I mean, it just indicated that this they can't possibly go down this path. So why? I guess why did they? They do have informed people in the United States. We know. So how do you make sense of this?
Right. So again, I agree with you in that this war doesn't make any sense. It's not rational. And everyone knows that America was going to lose this war. The problem is that when empires are in decline, this is just the way they behave. And there's just the historical record, it's pretty overwhelming in that when empires decline, they lash out against the world. They start these stupid wars they can't possibly win. They overextend themselves, and the collapse is terrible for the world. And America very much is an empire in decline. Look at things such as the collapse of the family. Look at things such as the collapse of the currency. Currency debasement in America is just a tremendous problem. The US dollar is no longer worth as much as it was like 10 years ago. The political polarization in America. Congress just cannot function properly. The president has so much power nowadays because Congress has basically decided to just not do anything to avoid any political responsibility. And so it's destroying the checks and balance systems of the US Constitution. Um, the economic depression in America is great. Young people feel as though there's absolutely no hope in the world. They're refusing to have families. They're refusing to invest in the future. They gamble all the time. And so America is really the end of empire at this point. And so what they do is they go and start wars in order to distract people's attentions, in order to prove to the world that they still have it. they're still the bully in the playground, and they can still beat up every other kid, even though they're old and they're weak and they're handicapped. Um, and so, we talk about Iran, but like, look at what was happening before Iran, right? Trump uh, kidnapped the president of Venezuela, which went against international law. Trump deployed his navy in the Caribbean and started to bomb drug boats, which is again against international law. Trump was threatening to annex Greenland. He was threatening to invade Canada. He was threatening to attack Mexico. Right now, he's embargoing Cuba, and people don't even recognize this is happening because there's so much going on in the world. But Cuba was dependent on Venezuela oil. That was its energy supply. And now that Venezuela has fallen to the Americans have embargoed Cuba, and so now people don't have access to electricity. And there are actually people who are starving in Cuba. So this is an empire in decline. It just lashes out against the world. It attacks everyone. And Iran is just the most current iteration of this anger and this hubris. But this hubris made the Americans underestimate the capacity of Iran. They went in thinking that once they decapitate the regime, then the government would fall. And what the Americans didn't recognize was the resilience and the resolve of the